It's a term that's used by most of the cold case units across the country that we never forget. We don't ever forget a homicide. A homicide has no statute of limitations in the state of Virginia. We go back and completely review the incident. We start from scratch. The witnesses are re-interviewed. We make phone calls. Every witness is important to a violent crime. Sometimes there's only one phone call that's needed to crack a case. To refresh your memory, it takes maybe showing the crime scene. We'll do that to solve a case.
Our violent crimes unit as a whole, our purpose is to lock up the perpetrator for the crime. There's somebody out there that knows something about every homicide. I think a lot of times as time goes by, they think it's not important anymore. They may think, well, nobody's looking at that. And that's what we want to get back out there is we never stop looking. Our motto is we never forget. Anything is important. Something somebody thinks wouldn't mean anything to them may mean a lot to us, and it may be just what we need to solve that case.
Working cold cases, we have the time to sit down and to analyze a case. We have weeks, we have months, we have years. The individual that we suspect in this case probably thinks he's gotten away. We feel that we're on his heels right now. We hope through this medium we're going to generate some attention to this case, and also that it's going to make him react, to know that we're getting close to him. This was a homicide investigation that occurred in eastern Henrico County on August the 23rd, 1991. Henrico Fire was dispatched to respond to a vehicle fire on Interstate 64 off-ramp to Mechanicsville Turnpike. The vehicle fire involved a 1979 white pickup truck, and once on scene, fire discovered that the fire was not fully involved, but that the engine compartment was smoldering. The hood was up, and they could smell the strong odor of gasoline. They immediately got the fire under control, and one of the firefighters appeared inside the vehicle. At that time, they found a victim, a white male, 16 years old, dead from unknown causes. The first officer on scene realized what he had and immediately called investigators and forensics unit. The forensics persons called a medical examiner and determined that the victim had died from multiple stab wounds. The victim had sustained approximately 29 stab and cut wounds to his body. The wounds were in locations covering the head to his legs. The victim was identified as Marshall Ray Butler, a 16-year-old resident of Henrico County.
Marshall grew up mainly in Sandston area and played baseball and all through Sandston Little League and everything. They really did do pretty well at that. I enjoyed it, I think, as much as he did. We kind of figured out that he really was musically inclined and he really liked music. And he started out taking clarinet. I think he did that in about the 6th or 7th grade. And every year he wanted to change because he would get bored. Then the second year he played trombone. Then he played bass cello. Well, then when he played bass cello, he used to always try to play it like a guitar. So we got him a guitar for Christmas one year. And he didn't even know, well, I'm sure from taking it in school, he knew how to read some notes and everything. But I mean, he would listen to a song and just pick it up, you know, and just play. You know, and he was awfully protective of me as he got older. Bill and I had been dating for about a year. And you know, Marshall was my #1 priority, obviously. And you know, he was probably 12, maybe close to 13. And he said, "Mom, but I really like Bill. If you want to marry him, you can marry him." And I said, "Okay, thank you very much for your permission." I try not to focus on what happened to him because you can drive yourself crazy, you know, so I do try to remember all the good times.
I remember one time when we were going to be fishermen. We went to Bassarama, and I think I spent my whole paycheck in there. We bought everything. We didn't have anything. We bought rods and reels and stuff you squirt on there with the lures, and we filled the whole tackle box up with stuff, and we fished all day long in the hot sun and didn't catch anything, so we threw everything in the lake and went home.
I remember that. Marshall said, "Bill just said throw it in the lake." I own a beauty shop. I opened it up in 1982, September the 1st, 1982. I knew I had to do something because back then it was just Marshall and I. He would come by my shop. Oh gosh, sometimes, you know, I'd have to run him off, you know, because he'd come by so many times. But he had called me the night before and asked me could he spend the night at a friend's house, and I said yes, in Mechanicsville. So when I was getting ready for work the next morning, he came in, him and my half-sister, Krystal, and her boyfriend, and he said he had been working on the truck and he looked like it too. So I told him, I said, "You need to take a shower. I've got to go to work." So I went on and went to work, and he came on up to the shop later on, and it was probably around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. He had been up there a little bit before then, and then came back around 1 o'clock and was supposed to go to my brother's and work on the truck. So I gave him $10 for lunch. I said, you know, your uncle's not home yet, and go get you something to eat or whatever. And he called me around 3 o'clock from his girlfriend's house in Sandston. And that was the last time that I heard from him. And the detectives came around 20 minutes to 7 that evening, and one of the police officers was my neighbor, and I knew something was really wrong. And of course, he had only had the truck for about a month, and so I thought he had had an accident. So I sat down, and my mom was at the shop, and my half-sister and her boyfriend. And he said, "No, it wasn't an accident. He was murdered." And I mean, I just could not believe that somebody could do something like that to him. And so here we are, 15 years later, and still no answers.
I see the stick's down in the filler cap, and that's holding the little pedal down, so that if they were dumping gas out of this can where they don't have a filler cap, they needed some way to hold that little plunger open.
Exactly.
So they could pour gas into it. So they had it propped open so gas would run into the tank.
And obviously the truck didn't start, so he goes around and he goes, takes the breather off.
Puts gas in the carburetor.
Tries to purge the carburetor.
Okay.
Obviously the fire was important to us at the time because we thought that whoever committed this crime was trying to destroy evidence. We today in the cold case unit feel that that was not true. We feel that the perpetrator ran out of gas. As you review the crime scene, you can see that there's a gas can that's inside with the victim that was empty, that the gas cap itself had been taken off and thrown into the bed of the truck, and that the door leading to the gas cap was partially open. Further investigation determined that the breather cap had been taken off of the truck. This was 1991, the vehicle was in 1979. Probably when the vehicle ran out of gas, we suspect that the suspect attempted to prime the engine through its carburetor to get the vehicle started a little quicker. Priming the engine is a technique that we use on old vehicles. I'll age myself by saying that a lot of the older vehicles back the 60s, 70s, 80 models had carburetors, which we don't have on most of the newer vehicles nowadays. To prime the engine would entail him pouring gasoline into the carburetor. And again, we found no funnels or no devices that would have allowed him to do this in a clean or imperfect fashion. We suspect that that gasoline, as he was attempting to pour it into the carburetor, splashed on the engine, causing the brief fire that we had. There were several things that we were looking for once the forensics people got on scene. Obviously, we wanted to determine whether this incident had occurred where the body was found, inside the vehicle. Forensics leads us to believe that that's not the case. We feel that this murder took place somewhere else other than where he was found.
As in all cases, a scene kind of talks to you, and as you looked at the scene, you observed that the victim was crouched in the floorboard on the passenger side. His head was up on the seat. There was definite signs of trauma around his head and around his shoulder area that was visible. There was things in the back of the truck, such as a T-shirt and some other things. We felt that the scene was telling us that possibly that the victim had not driven to the scene, that he was actually forced there and was a passenger in the vehicle.
One of the things that we determined that from is that the grass was found in his hair. Obviously, the pickup truck, we found no other indications that any grassy material other than what we found on his hair and on the seat of the truck. And again, it wasn't a lot of grass, but again, that told us that this incident took place somewhere else other than where he was found. Our forensics people did a great job of obtaining prints from under the hood of the vehicle where the breather cap had been removed. Also, they took prints off of the exterior portion of the truck and the interior portion of the truck. Recently, we have just gotten one of those prints identified. And now we have a direction we can go in this investigation.
In Virginia, we've had the Virginia State Police AFIS, Automated Fingerprint Identification System, and also we have access to the FBI's automated database. And those are both fingerprint systems that are totally searchable with crime scene prints. But we recognized a number of years ago that we weren't using the palm prints. In 2003, we acquired an AFEX tracker system, and the purpose of that was to develop a searchable palm print database localized here in Henrico County. Most people do associate fingerprint identification with fingerprints, and they don't think about the other areas of skin that are present that could support an identification. Palm prints have the exact same potential for identification that fingerprints do.
On the left, you're going to see the latent that was lifted in the crime scene. And then on the right is the area that the latent was compared to in the palm system and was a possible match. It is a good feeling to know that after 15 years, the technology that we have at this date in Henrico was able to give us a new lead in a case that at this point was cold.
This particular case was one of those that went in very early. I believe it was the 6th or 7th palm print that I actually put in that database. In this particular situation where we hit this particular palm print, this identification is an absolute identification. So I will be able at some point to say that that palm print was made by a particular individual to the exclusion of all other people. You can see here we have some real small stains. Some of these are less than 1 millimeter in diameter. And that's very characteristic of impact spatter. Back in 1991, I believe in the fall of 1991, after this incident, I actually went to a facility where the vehicle was impounded, and I did a preliminary bloodstain analysis of the vehicle. Now, I will take those notes, they were taken some 16 years ago, and I will take photographic documentation and any other important documentation that was developed with this investigation, such as notes, sketches, medical examiner reports. I'll take all of those things, and what I'll do is I'll actually do a formal bloodstain pattern analysis, primarily looking at the notes that I developed or the information that I developed back in 1991, and any photographs that we may have that were taken either of the crime scene or specifically for the purpose of bloodstain analysis. I've been very fortunate to be involved in a number of older cases here in Henrico County where we do the investigative part of the case right after the crime scene from a forensic aspect of it. And you put it away. You do what you can at that time. You put it away, and you don't really ever know if all that work you did back years ago will ever be used or will amount to anything. So when we do reopen an old investigation because of some discovery, particularly a forensic discovery, to me it's very exciting, because now I know that there's a possibility now that all the work we've done will be of value, and maybe this case will come to a closure because of that.
I even got swabs from the ground, blood from the ground.
At the scene?
At the scene. I've always felt that this case was solvable. There was evidence collected the next day from the truck itself, dealing with fingerprints and everything, and we recovered a large amount of fingerprints from the truck. And I've always thought that we've had the suspect's fingerprints, but we've just never been able to put the fingerprints to that suspect.
The palm print was found on the passenger side of the vehicle, just several feet away from where the white T-shirt was found on the bed of the truck. And we think both of these pieces of evidence are going to connect us to a possible suspect. We're looking to have that T-shirt examined by our forensics lab to determine whether the DNA of the suspect could be on that T-shirt. Again, hot day, he's sweating, he's nervous, he's worrying about being detected, he's in a highly populated area, he's in a hurry. The truck has run out of gas, he's now taking his T-shirt off because of the heat, and he left it on that truck. What we try to do in any investigation, we try to establish a timeline. We know that Marshall had gone by his mother's business at approximately 1 p.m. That day of August 23rd. He stayed a short time at his mother's business, left, and proceeded on to his girlfriend's house. At that time, a black male was in the vehicle with him. That person never got out of the vehicle, went into his girlfriend's house, so she never saw who he was. He was there for a short period of time and then he left. This was approximately 3 hours prior to Marshall's body being found. There's one particular person that we interviewed back in 1991 that we haven't had a chance to re-interview. And obviously the cold case unit would like to talk to her. That person is his aunt, Krystal Thomas. She has, for whatever reasons, just has been around the family. She's been estranged from the family. Obviously, we think that she may have some information that would help us to solve this particular murder. This is one of the cases that we have in cold case that's been assigned to us that we think is very solvable. Here with the recent evidence that we've obtained, hopefully with the DNA that we're going to get here in the near future, we don't need but a little bit from the public, a witness to come forward. This case is very solvable.
Every time he came to my shop, when he'd leave, he'd kiss me, whether he'd kiss me on the cheek or he'd kiss my hand or something, you know, and say, "Love you, Mom." Well, that particular day, I was busy, and he stood at the door and winked at me and went, and that was the last time I saw him. And you know, those kisses, you don't really realize how much they mean until you don't have them anymore. Every day, it's just my faith, my family, and my friends that have gotten me through it. But just to know, or just to think that somebody's still out there that did this horrific thing to him is, I think that they should pay for what they did.